Financial Planner, Flow on YouTube.
The Cabal didn't expect this to happen. Next event, locked and loaded. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we understand that the Cabal is very nervous because there's many different investigations going on with regards to the Uranium One deal, the Trump dossier, Fusion GPS, Hillary Clinton's email, Uranium One, and the rest. And they're very worried about these investigations because as they dig deeper, they're going to find out a lot of information. And there is a congressional committee. They're looking into Hillary Clinton's email server, and they're looking at the FBI reports, and they are saying that they have uncovered new irregularities and contradictions inside the FBI's probe of Hillary Clinton's email server. Now, we understand that this was a complete cover-up, and we're starting to get different facts that are coming out showing us that, yes, this was a cover-up by Comey and the rest. Now, there is clear evidence confirming that there was favoritism and prejudice within the FBI. Investigators say they have secured written evidence that the FBI believed there was evidence that some laws were broken when the former Secretary of State and her top aides transmitted classified information through her insecure, private, personal email server. That evidence includes passages in the FBI documents stating the sheer volume of classified information that flowed through Clinton's insecure emails was proof of criminality, as well as an omission of false statements by one of key witnesses in the case. This is coming from one of the investigators that is looking into this. The name of the witness is redacted from the FBI documents, but lawmakers said he was an employee of a computer firm that helped maintain her personal server after she left office as America's diplomat. And we can see right now they are looking into this. So the investigators also confirmed that the FBI began drafting a statement exonerating Clinton of any crimes while evidence responsive to subpoenas was still outstanding and before agents had interviewed more than a dozen key witnesses. Those witnesses included Clinton and the computer firm employee who permanently erased her email archives just days after the emails were subpoenaed by Congress. And this is coming from the investigator. And they're looking into this, and the Cabal understands and they realize that it's just a matter of time before something happens. Now, what's very interesting, there was a fire in the Clinton house in Chappaqua. Firefighters said they were rushed over there. There was a fire in there. Did they destroy the evidence? What really happened there? We don't know as of yet, but maybe that information will come out a little bit later. We see French President Macron. He's out there with the rest of the countries who are part of the deep state system, and they are trying to block certain news stories, which they call fake news. And the reason why they're doing this is they're imposing censorship. And this is what happens with those people in power. They don't want certain stories to come out that they don't want. And especially during election year, they want full control to make sure that the next person gets voted in. And we see right now, following Germany and Brussels, we see that Macron said on Wednesday he would overhaul French media legislation this year to fight the spread of fake news. Now again, how do they determine what is fake and what is real? Because the things that we talked about in the past, where we said, oh, the Islamic State is part of the United States, the coalition forces, that the United States was bombing the infrastructure of Syria to allow the Islamic State to spread throughout the country. Of course, back then, they would have said that was fake news. What we've come to learn today is that that was all true. And now there's more and more evidence coming out showing that the Cabal was using the Islamic State, it is their paid mercenary army, to push their agendas in certain areas. So once again, it looks like the deep state is doing whatever they possibly can, the Cabal, to shut down any type of story that doesn't jive with what their narrative. That's what they're trying to do. And that's what these dictators do all the time. We see North Korea. It looks like they have opened the cross-border hotline for the first time in 2 years, both sides spoke to each other. Now, South Korea, Moon Jae-in, wants to speak to North Korea. North Korea wants to speak to South Korea. South Korea is technically cutting out the U.S. from negotiations. They're not involved in this. And this tells us that they don't want the U.S. involved in this. Now remember, China and Russia have for months been pushing their roadmap to peace. That would involve the U.S. and the South Korea suspending their military exercises on the Korean Peninsula. Now, Moon Jae-in in South Korea said, listen, can we suspend military operations during the Olympics? It makes no sense to do this. The U.S. said no, because the Cabal, they don't want this to stop. They want to continually provoke North Korea. But we can see the push is on for peace. And I believe, once again, that this whole thing about provoking North Korea, holding off the Cabal from invading, trying to have regime change, was to allow North Korea to become a nuclear state. This was really the plan of the U.S., Russia, China, and South Korea. And it's not the plan of the Cabal. They wanted North Korea to become a nuclear state. They wanted them to get inspected. This way, the Cabal has no reason to have regime change in this country, because they don't want to invade a country that is a nuclear power. And once again, we can see that North Korea could unite with the South for the Winter Olympics. Now, does the Cabal want this to happen? No. This is why I'm saying something could occur during this time period where the Cabal creates some type of an event. Now, we see right now Trump is out there, and Nikki Haley is backing him up like crazy. And a lot of times I think this is all put on to trap the Cabal in certain instances, like Syria, for instance. When he launched the missiles into a airbase that was completely empty, it was operational an hour later, he warned Russia, he warned Assad, and basically Russia shot down a lot of the missiles. And then everyone thought that, we were going in and invading. Now, if you listen to Trump back then, all his tweets and stuff, it sounded like we were going to invade. But I think he does these things on purpose to get the Cabal all riled up and the neocons all riled up. Because think about what he's doing. He's playing their game, but just out in the open, where he's saying, let's go in and get them. Let's go. Let's fire our missiles. Let's do it. And nothing ever happens. It's a lot of talk to get them all confused, and what is he doing here? It makes no sense. Now, he's saying that he's going to be cutting $300 million annual aid to the Palestinians because it gets no appreciation or respect in return. He wants them to work with Israel to have peace. Now, Israel doesn't really want to have peace with Palestinians. Even though Netanyahu's out there telling that, yes, we back the freedom fighters of Iran, we're behind them, they should do it for democracy and freedom, but he never says this about the Palestinians. This, I believe, right now is a way to try to force the two together. Will it work? Most likely not. And we can see Nikki Haley, she is all over this, trying to push this. Now, what's very interesting is that what is happening out in Iran. Now, Trump is out there and he is saying that, we're backing the Iranian people. We respect the people of Iran as they try to take back their corrupt government. You will see great support from the United States at the appropriate time. And when is the appropriate time? So let's take a look at what is really happening out in Iran. Because as we know, and he knows this too, believe me, he knows what is going on here. He knows that they want regime change in Iran. That is a fact, just like in Syria. And if he was really going to go into Iran, he might as well have invaded Syria to go into Iran. There'd be no purpose in skipping Iran, taking the troops out of there, not supporting the paid mercenary army. He would have supported the paid mercenary army. They would have had Assad by now. But this is not what's happening. So we can see right now that there has been a push in Iran to have protests. Now, what's very interesting is that there are government protests that are much, much larger than the other protests that are happening right now. And what is happening is that the Western media Israel and the rest. They're out there saying this is terrible. The people want freedom. They want democracy. We need to have freedom and democracy. Nikki Haley is out there saying that the long oppressed people are rising up against their dictators. It's the same exact script they used in Syria, in Libya, in Lebanon. There is no difference whatsoever. And what is happening right now is they're trying to push this where there's nothing to push. This is why Nikki Haley was out there showing the missile that was fired in Saudi Arabia, that it came from Iran, because they were trying to make a connection because they knew this was going to happen, and that whole thing fell apart. Now, what is happening here is that the Iranian protesters that were protesting, there's a couple things that are happening. Yes, there were protesters, but it's not what we're being told. The protesters were protesting because of economic reasons. Yes, they were out there. They were saying that, we don't like what's going on. There's austerity and things like that. So the Western world is reporting that these protests have grown because of this. But there is no evidence that the protests have even grown. What has grown are riots. People using, fire bombs, breaking windows, burning flags, things like that. That is on the rise. Why? Because those people that were protesting against the austerity budget of President Rouhani, those protests were hijacked by rioting gangs. Now, they knew there were going to be a couple of protests. They're very small, hundreds of people. That's it. And they knew they were going to use this, and they were trying to push this. Now, Ahmad News, a channel on Telegram, appears to have played a pivotal role in the wave of protests. Reportedly administered by exiled journalist Rohala Zam, a son of senior reformist cleric, said to have escaped the country after being accused of having links with foreign intelligence agencies and pushing, these type of problems inside the country. Now, there were calls for protests online and on foreign-based Persian language satellite channels. The original protests over economic issues seem to have died down now, after President Rouhani confirmed the right to protest, conceded economic problems, and promised to take them on. Those original protesters that were protesting peacefully, those are dying down now. What we're seeing right now is those people who hijacked the protests, the rioters, the people that cover their faces, that are running around like crazy, pulling the flags down off poles, burning them, lighting things on fire. That is the agent provocateurs trying to get things off the ground. The groups of rioters are between 30 and 80 people in size in each one of these cities. That's it. But what they do is they use certain camera angles. They only show a small little group of people doing this to make it look like it's bigger than ever. And a lot of times what they use different footage from different places to show that the police are coming down hard on these people and the protests are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But we're really not seeing this. Now, these rioters, if they start, getting weapons from the outside and they use these weapons to create an instance, yes, this will make the situation a lot worse. But what we're seeing right now is that 11 cities is less than half than the 30 cities with protest riots that were counted yesterday. The police in Iran don't act the same way as the police in other countries. The police in Iran, they speak to the people. They don't act out. They don't come down hard on the people. Actually, if you look at a lot of the videos, the government demonstrations and the other protests, the police are speaking with people. They're not doing what the Western media is telling you they're doing. And this is the problem with the Cabal. This is something that they didn't expect because they don't understand the Iranian people. They don't realize that they work together, they speak to each other, and they don't act in a way that other countries do. And this is their main problem, and they know this. This is why we see right now the U.S. envoy calls for an emergency UN session on Iran protests because they realize that it's not going in the way they want. Nikki Haley is out there and she's holding all these news conferences saying the people of Iran are crying out for freedom. No, they're not. They were just protesting because of the economic policies. It was a small group of people and this was hijacked. So what we're seeing right now is that it is falling apart. And it looks like a lot of this is under control. And the government protests, where they're not protesting against the government, where they're giving support to the government, they are huge in the country. And again, the cabal did not expect this to happen, and they're having a huge problem. Now, London Paul was on Rogue Money, and he says the United States has for decades, along with Israel and other countries, tried to enact regime change in Iran, but has been unsuccessful so far, since the overthrow of Iran has been elusive both militarily and economically. And he's saying that the deep state is trying to overthrow Iran with a type of homegrown uprising. Now, London Paul says that what is at stake is a blooming economic powerhouse relationship between Russia, China, and Iran. He says that, yes, there are some aspects of the truth to the protests, but he says that the cabal will not be able to succeed in overthrowing the Iranian government. And he even points out that the cabal even produced propaganda videos on MSM showing 3-year-old videos of protests in Bahrain, not Iran, like is being reported. And we can see this is what they've done in the past, where they're trying to show you something because they want you to say, oh my God, look how big it is. Look, everyone is getting out there. But actually the opposite is happening. The original protests, those protesters, well, they're not doing it anymore. They're saying, okay, Rouhani spoke to us, we get it, we're going back to our houses. The rioters are still out there, but it looks like they are under control. And the cabal is very nervous about this because they just lost the control, the push to create something in Iran. So it's not working. And this tells us that most likely they're getting prepared and ready to do something else, where the next event is most likely locked and loaded and ready to go, which means that something still can happen in Iran if they supply these individuals with weapons. Maybe they will kill the general. Remember that report where it was showing that the United States gave Israel the permission to shoot and assassinate the general? See, they're trying to do whatever they possibly can to get something started, because if they can assassinate the general, they could start a war. This is something they would love to have. They would love to have Iran act out and a war get started, but I don't think Iran is going to do this. They haven't started a war in 200 years, and it looks like they've miscalculated the entire thing. But again, remember, they're rotating between Iran, Ukraine, Syria, which they're trying to get off the ground again, and North Korea. And everything, once again, is all up in the air because they are not finished. They're going to continually push their event. And we see right now that Russia, they have approved the expansion of a Syrian naval base that's in Tartus, where they're going to expand it, where they're going to bring in more ships. And again, they're protecting Syria. And their whole goal was to get Iran, Syria, Libya, Lebanon, and the rest of the countries and control them. It's not working. They completely miscalculated once again. This doesn't mean that they're finished with their plans. It means they're just going to regroup and they're going to plan whatever the letter is at this point, and they're going to try the next event. It could be some type of an explosion in Iran. It could be the Olympics in North Korea, South Korea. It could be something in Ukraine. Whatever they're going to try, they need to do it very soon because they are losing control very quickly.